Test.
Oh, okay.
One more time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One more time. Welcome to Court Reporter Confidential.
A place to talk about all things court reporting, including industry news, technology, best practices, and personal experiences from professionals in the field.
Welcome back to another episode of Court Reporter Confidential. I'm your host, Isaiah Leslie. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Kelly Galligan. Thank you for coming, Kelly.
Thanks for having me.
Kelly, many of you may know, especially here in Orange County, she's a fixture of the legal community. She is an M&A attorney. She's a partner at Rutan Tucker. She advises businesses when they're in various stages of getting ready to sell or thinking about selling. She's a trusted advisor and has done many deals in her own short but very accomplished career. And so we're grateful to have her on the pod today. Talk a little bit about, for our court reporter audience, what you might want to think about if you wanted to grow your own book of business, maybe become an agency owner, or for our audience members who own an agency or a small agency, how you might leverage that or grow it or get ready to sell it and have your legacy live on. So with that, Kelly, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think that introduction is better than anything I could have said. What I do on a day-to-day basis, though, is I represent founder entrepreneurs doing exactly that, realizing their dreams. They might want to grow in their business, and I help make that possible.
Great. And I should also mention she has just recently been named Attorney of the Year in Orange County. So I'll give her some praise for that because she's definitely worth that as well. She's done really good work here about that. But let's talk a little bit more about some of the kind of cases, or not cases, but some of the clients that you've worked with over the years and maybe some of the ones that might be relatable to our court reporter audience.
Sure. So I represent, again, I mentioned founder-led businesses, founder entrepreneur-led businesses, private companies, largely in Orange County, but really all over the country. I do actually have a really large practice with agencies, so I'm excited to be talking about this. Not court reporting agencies, marketing agencies.
Interesting.
With a lot of similarities. It's one of those things where when you kind of get in an industry, I'm sure you guys see this with litigation, you get in with one group and things start to snowball. So I've worked a lot with helping people as small businesses scale them either organically or through acquisitions, which is when I really get involved. And then typically, you know, where I come into most value is they get to a point where they're ready to sell to a buyer. And I've hopefully been working with the business for a long time, and I lead them through that sale acquisition as well.
That's great. I had no idea. That's really neat. Of course, there's so many synergies and things that overlap. So let's talk a bit about those two things, organic growth and then acquisition purchase. Yeah.
Sure. So organic growth is probably what most listeners are just doing naturally. That is just growing your business. So a lot of times in what I see in the marketing agency space, I see it similarly I work for a lot of service providers like lawyers. And I imagine you see this as well. You start as maybe even independent contractor. Maybe you set up your S Corp or your LLC or your sole prop, and you're doing some work. You might be doing some work for a third party. You're going out, you're building relationships. You're, in your case, visiting law firms, taking lawyers to lunch. All of a sudden you start building up a reputation, and then you go, oh man, I have enough work to feed myself. And then all of a sudden you get really busy, and you're like, wow, this is fun. I'm so busy, but if I want to make more money, in order to make more, it requires me to work more hours. And at some point that becomes unsustainable. So then that's when you say, you know what, maybe I'm going to farm out. Maybe I'm going to hire someone else to now come in and start doing my work. Or maybe I'm going to hire internally to help with my processes and systems internally. And I'm going to create more of a system. And that's organic growth. And it can work really well. The only downside to organic growth is that it usually takes years to grow that way.
That was our experience as well.
So that's how you started?
Yeah, that's how we started, yeah.
Yeah. And you guys did a great job, right? Like, I don't think there's a single attorney in Orange County who doesn't know Isaiah, your name personally, and also Regal.
That's very kind. Yeah, very similar story to a lot of people starting out. We started out of our house, right? Mm-hmm. My wife and I, and she started, so her story is probably similar to a lot of court reporters. So she started working for a larger agency first. And over the course of 3 years, she had 4 or 5 lawyers that specifically requested her and wanted to work with her. And so when she was ready to start her own agency, she took those 4 or 5, and so that was our book of business. And from there, we just kind of scaled it. I think where it helped us and where it might help audience listeners is it's good to have a partner, that can do that for you, because the leveraging your time became an issue, right? Like she's actually a technician, so she can do some marketing, which she's in a depot, right, and opposing counsel, but she's got to produce a transcript. So if you don't have somebody marketing your services as well, that organic growth, at least in our experience, it would have been much slower even. Yeah.
Right. What I tell entrepreneurs is think about what's the best use of an hour of your time. So for some people, it might be spending 1 hour in the courtroom. It might be spending 1 hour producing that transcript. It might be spending an hour, networking with that law firm or taking clients to lunch or really kind of developing those relationships. It might be managing a team of people who are doing those things. And the higher you get up in that chain, the more leverage you have on your business and the quicker you can grow.
That is a great point. And I learned that the hard way as a sales guy, right?
Yeah.
So that was my lane. And so for many years, I was the sales team for Regal. And there came a time a few years ago after COVID where it wasn't the best use of my hour to be doing that. And so we hired we hired a salesperson and a marketing person. And the growth from that alone was way better than I could have imagined. But it was me giving up control, right? Which is hard. That's probably
so
something
hard.
you see a lot with owners too. But the return on that was incredible. Yeah.
It can be scary though, right? Because you have to step away from something that you've done that makes money, and it puts money in your 1 hour of work, they pay me this amount of dollars, it goes right in my pocket, to now trusting other people to do that work, which is another skill, and managing that team. But I mean, like you said, all of a sudden you started scaling, you realize, other people are great at sales too. I can really focus on another thing where my 1 hour of time is best spent. But I see that every single day. It's really scary to make that transition.
So how do people go from the organic side? Because I think most people start out doing that, right?
Yeah.
It's easier. There's less risk involved. It's slower. But what point do you think makes sense for somebody to think about looking at other agencies to purchase?
Sure. So this is what I'm most excited about because this is what I do most of. And I will also say it's not legal advice. I don't represent anyone listening personally. But you can scale organic growth again. It's consistent. It's, like you said, it can be easy because you know what to do, but it can be slow. Scaling through acquisitions can be massive growth, and it can happen super quickly. And there's pros and cons to that, obviously, right? Let's talk about the pros first. The pros are you can go buy another business, and that business is automatically a part of what you have, and you don't have to. I think the misconception is somebody says that business is worth $5 million. I don't have $5 million to go buy a business. And so they just think I can't acquire. I think to your point, it's good to kind of build up some infrastructure, right? Maybe build a name in the community. You have this organic growth. Maybe you have a team. And when you get to that point, then you can start looking at acquisitions. And I wouldn't say, if you look at a business worth $5 million, I wouldn't automatically say, I can't afford it because I don't have $5 million, because that's not how you buy a $5 million business. There's a few ways to do it. One is you might, have $1 million. You might have relationships with a lender, and the lender will come in. It might either be a lender plus SBA financing as well. Maybe they're bringing in $2 or $3 million. You also might have seller financing, which is where instead of just giving the seller, their $5 million at closing, you might give them, in this example, let's see, you brought in one, you financed two. Maybe they have $1 million of seller financing, and that means they get a note for that $1 million. And that $1 million is paid, that note is paid out by the income that's produced by the company. So as the company that you bought starts to produce income, that pays down the note. So you're basically using the business you purchased to buy out the seller. And now we're $1 million short. So how do we bridge that gap? There's a few options there. There's earnouts. You might say, if the business hits these certain targets, usually revenue targets, they might kind of earn that remaining $1 million, or you could also work with somebody else. So maybe the company that you're buying, maybe you're buying out somebody who's ready to retire. That company might have an employee who's ready to step in, and they want to be an owner, right? They don't want to just be an employee anymore. So you can say, great, what can you bring? Can you, maybe they only have 500,000, but you now bring them in as a partner, and they become a co-owner with you. And that can kind of help you bridge the gap. I will say though, that will help you finish the first transaction, which is buying out the seller. But then you have a whole second transaction, which is you now have a partnership with another owner. Right. It's a whole nother situation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. All those different avenues you approach, because we've talked about the first two, the SBA and then the seller financing, and those actually our most recent acquisition, which I can announce live on this podcast. We just acquired our fourth court reporting agency. They're up in Encino. I'll share the name in the notes once we get this produced. But that's our fourth acquisition, and in that particular scenario, we considered seller financing at one point. They were open to that. We ended up doing an all cash purchase at the end of the day, but that was something we hadn't considered previously. That a seller would be willing to take sort of an earn out over a couple of years. We did a purchase before that where we paid a percentage of the AR out to the owner, which is, I guess, a similar kind of setup to seller financing, but not. It was a longer period of time, and it was a percentage of the AR, right? But that was a big deal. And then the first purchase we made was we used an SBA loan, a 7A SBA loan for the operating expense to cover that purchase.
I think the takeaway with that is there's a way to make it work.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and every deal is different, right? Every owner,
Yes.
and we can start talking about the owner side of things and the mindset in just a second. But that last option was an option that I think in certain places I've heard about this happening. I know in Florida there was several agency owners, smaller owners, family-owned agencies that wanted to buy a bigger agency with much more revenue, and they pooled their resources and became partners together in that. So again, I've seen everything you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I love when these two parties kind of pool and buy, because you now have how many more people on your team, especially if people who come together to purchase are operators at the business, because guess what? Now you don't have employees, you have owners who truly care, right? If somebody has skin in the game, that you better believe they're going to care a lot more about the business that they're involved in.
Absolutely. And we cherish that. With our third purchase we had literally at the beginning of this year, she stayed on as a court reporter for us as an independent contractor. And the incentive there is for her to grow the business, and she'll make more money. So she's now become one of our best court reporter outside of my wife, of course. And she's actively marketing, so she became like a salesperson for us, even though she's not directly working for us in that way. It was such a great setup for us. So, yeah.
So did you guys have to go through the process of what does our relationship look like now that we're partners? How are decisions made? What happens if you decide to stop working? What happens if you pass away?
Right.
You had to have those
All
conversations
that,
probably.
And she's not technically on the payroll in that sense, but she is a partner. Or her incentives when she sold the business to us go up if she brings
I
in more
see.
revenue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she gets some upside if
Correct.
she grows the business. I mean, it makes sense, right? It puts the motivation and
it's
the
a win for everybody.
incentives in the right place. Yeah.
And I think, what I've heard from agency owners, especially older ones who are like kind of overdoing the managing of it, they still want to report. They still want to be out in the field doing stuff. They just don't want to deal with the overhead of operating a business. I don't know if you see that a lot or with older agency owners.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And a lot of times they have the longstanding relationships.
Right.
And we don't want to lose those. And they have a lot of the knowledge, and you see it in every industry. The people who work under them really respect them.
Yeah.
And they don't want them gone. And there's a lot of value that they bring to the business. So you don't need to buy them out and kick them out.
Right.
You just kind of restructure things so that they make sense.
So how would you, we'll get to selling the business in just a second, but how would you go about, say you're a young court reporter who maybe has a few clients of her own, she wants to purchase an agency. What are the best ways to approach a potential seller or an owner who you may not be sure if they're willing to sell yet? What do you suggest?
You can do one of two ways. You can either work with a broker and have that broker reach out directly.
Okay.
It's a little bit less personal, a little bit more transactional, but a very, very common way. So don't feel like, I'm going to offend anybody if this broker reaches out, or you can do it naturally. I have clients, I represent a lot of founder entrepreneurs. So people come to me every day and they say, this guy, what they usually say is this guy or this gal who I've been in the same industry with and I really respect and I've known him for 20 years, reached out to me and said, hey, are you interested in selling your business to me? That's the most common. And I think the most positive response people get is when it's somebody that they've known in the industry. So my first conversation, or my first recommendation would be to have a conversation, take them to lunch. Hopefully it's somebody you've worked with for a while, but if it's not, if you're reaching out to somebody in another state that you don't know, reach out to them on a personal note first, because in my experience, founders and entrepreneurs who've built their business are very protective over their business. So that's why private equity gets a bad rap. And I do not think private equity deserves the rap it gets, but I understand the concern. It sounds like someone's coming in and trying to buy your land out from under you, right? It feels impersonal.
Right.
So if you are going to make those outreaches, I would make them very personal, and I would say, can I take you to lunch? I operate in this space. I'm not trying to get any confidential information, but I'd love to, talk about your business and what you're doing out in blank state. And I would make it personal and I'd get to know them first, because I see a lot of buyers get shut down because they make it feel transactional. And I mean, if you think about it, with these owners that you're talking about who are maybe on the cusp of retiring, they've probably been building this business for 50 years. You better believe they care about their employees, they care about what they've built, and they don't want somebody coming out from California, taking over their business and turning it into a corporate shop. So they have to get to know you first if you're going to do a personal outreach.
Now, that makes a lot of sense. And I think we stumbled into that approach with our first acquisition. Stephanie had started, we can network with other agencies. It's very common, probably like referral businesses for lawyers. And so we were intentional about trying to find agencies that were not corporately owned, that we would network with, that we had a similar sort of branding or mission statement. And so Stephanie ended up networking quite a bit with an agency owner in West LA. Very, very nice lady, ran a great business, high quality, like some really, really good clients. And this agency owner really took a liking to Stephanie, and they got to know each other working over the next year or two. And at one point, Kelly, that's the name of the owner, approached Stephanie about if her interest in buying the agency. So to your point, it's exactly organic like that. Yeah.
And that is more valuable than anything any broker could do.
Right.
Now, she wanted to sell to Stephanie.
She wanted to sell to Stephanie because she saw the same values reflected in the agency. Now, for somebody like you, when would a court reporter come to you? I mean, you talked about broker, but when would an attorney kind of make sense for somebody in that process?
So I have clients who come to me. So the new kind of trend right now is the buy and build model. Okay. So it's an agency who says, hey, I've started to grow organically. I want to make this into something big. Maybe I want to buy 5 businesses and become something big and either operate it like that or then sell to either private equity or strategic up at the top level. So people will come to me when they're buying these first smaller businesses. And I always say, I'm happy to kind of chat about it, but I'm hourly. So you probably don't want to be on the phone with me 24/7. Right. Without, I'm gonna go have this meeting again with this person. I first of all, as a resource, I love to chat with you about all this stuff, but like when it comes to legal work, I wouldn't rely too heavily on your lawyer too early. Maybe have some initial conversations, see if there's some interest there, so you're not paying significant fees before there's even a deal. But this Kelly woman approaches Stephanie. She says, hey, Stephanie, I'd be interested if, what do you think? And Stephanie goes, let me go talk to Isaiah. Stephanie comes back and says, Kelly, we're into it. Tell us more. That's when Kelly calls me and says, can you put together an LOI? Here's what I'm thinking of. Here's kind of the price. Or Stephanie might even get thrown out a number, or Kelly might have thrown out a number to Stephanie. And Stephanie was like, that's within the range. And then that's when Kelly comes to me and says, can you put something on paper? I do think you need to have the lawyer look at the LOI before you sign it, on the buy side or the sell side. And I've had this is another misconception. People have come to me and they've said, here's the signed LOI. Don't worry, it's non-binding. And I'm like, no, I know it's non-binding. You don't have to follow through with the transaction. But the LOI sets the bones of the transaction. So we now need to work within the confines. If you're all of a sudden, if I point out something to you and I go, hey, you didn't realize that you're only getting paid this much up front and the majority of your compensation is tied to an earnout and they're going to control your business. And oh my gosh, how are we going to hit that? And you start freaking out. If we now come back to them with different terms, it's almost like we retraded the deal. So you can save a lot to make sure you're fully agreed on the LOI, the bones of the agreement at the outset. So always talk to me before you sign the LOI.
Very good. I love that. That's a great piece of advice. It's free advice, everybody at home. So, and the LOI is the letter of intent.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I knew exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Most people probably figure that out too.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. It sets forth like the purchase price, how they're going to buy you. If there is seller financing, it's like the key. It's like just like a bullet points of what the deal terms are. Yeah.
Right. Very important to have that. And that's every one of our 4 deals. That was something that we had to get to. There's a point in which that happens, and it has to happen every time, right?
Yes.
And so attorneys are important for that. So very good. Okay, so let's talk now, transition a little bit to the seller side of things, right? Okay. We probably have some people in our audience who may be on that other side of the equation and are looking to maybe sell. And in our line of work, and it's probably true for marketing too, right? There's usually 2 options, right? You can sell to corporate, right? Big national company, big national agency, let's say, who maybe has private equity, again, not bashing private equity, but private equity usually allows you to sell for more, right? I mean, there's a higher, you can get, we'll talk about EBITDA in a second, but generally speaking, the big corporations are likely to give you more money than if you were to sell to, say, a family-owned competitor. But that is the other option, is to sell to a smaller, perhaps agency that has some of the same values and culture that you're used to. And so there are different reasons to sell to both, is what I'm trying to get at. But maybe explain the seller mindset and how you line up for a sale.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a personal decision. It's the sale process is a very like soul searching period. Like before you sell your business, you need to be very thoughtful about, am I ready to sell? What is my life going to look like after I sell? Even if I'm going to continue to work for the business, I am now going to work for other people. And how does that feel? I'm now going to be an employee. I might have, been an entrepreneur my entire life. I don't know what it's like to answer to somebody else. Those are really personal questions. And then on who am I selling to side, as I mentioned, some people just get approached. And, in the Stephanie Kelly example you gave, it's a great example because a lot of times that feels good and, they know each other already and they can move forward with that. But if somebody approaches you out of the blue and says, I want to buy your company for blank dollars, you might be doing yourself a disservice if you don't go to market and find out, or talk to a broker and say, hey, somebody approached to buy me for blank million. Is that within the realm of what's reasonable, or should I go to market? More often than not, when you go to market and when you hire a broker, they'll create this package and they'll make your business look like this, beautiful, attractive thing that everyone wants to buy. And then the value will start bumping up. So a lot of times you start working with a broker and building this kind of beautiful package for sale. And then you'll get possibly multiple bidders, and you might have people on either side. So you might have somebody from down the street who in the industry, and they treat their employees well, but they go, gosh, I don't have all the cash to get me there. I'm working with an SBA lender. They're going to require you to do, blank % back on a seller note. So you're not going to get all your cash up front. And that's a little bit risky, right? Because you're now relying on the business that they're going to run to be able to produce the money to be able to pay down your note. As opposed to when a private equity buyer comes in, you're right. They have everything dialed. They've got the cash on hand. No financing contingencies. Will pay you out front. And another thing that is very popular with private equity firms is they also want you to have skin in the game. So they'll typically they invite you to, but a lot of times you want to, a portion of your sale is actually paid in rollover equity. And what that means is you sell effectively 90%, well, 10 to 20% is kind of customary, but let's say here you sell 90% of your business and the last 10% is rolled up into equity in the parent company. And so you now become an owner alongside them. And so the parent company might own, 5 to 100 agencies, and you now own all of them. And the goal of the private equity group is they want to keep building up, adding all these companies underneath them. They get bigger, and then they flip and sell to an even larger private equity group. And you now are an owner, so you get what they always say is a second bite at the apple. So you'll have a separate second sale transaction, and those can be incredibly profitable for sellers.
Got it. It's almost like a mutual fund of companies, right?
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But for some sellers, they don't like that because it feels very impersonal. And I mean, if you look at these private equity firms, their mission is to make money. They're focused on the bottom line.
Right.
They might not care about so-and-so in your office who's no longer producing, but you're like, but we keep them on the salary because they're good for morale.
Right.
You might not care about that stuff.
Right.
So there is some soul searching.
Sure. And again, I don't fault owners on either side of the equation. I mean, it's your business. You've built it the way you've wanted to build it. And so it's really, your decision how you want to pursue that. So, and I think it's healthy to have an all of the above approach, right? And so at the end of the day, client satisfaction is going to determine which companies survive and which don't. And so I think it's just a very healthy market to have those different options like you're talking about. So for an owner who knows that they want to sell, right? But maybe they've got a few years lead time. What do you recommend? How do you prepare a business to sell so that it is the most attractive to a buyer?
A lot of things you can do. Corporate hygiene is one.
What does that mean?
It is, do you have all your corporate docs in place? So a lot of times sellers do not have that kind of 2 to 3 year foresight. It'd be ideal if they did. That's great. If you happen to, make sure you have your corporate records in place, your formation documents. If you have other owners, make sure you have shareholders agreement if you're a corporation, or an operating agreement if you're an LLC. Know where those are. Do you have your customer contracts in place? Especially your biggest customers, and what do termination rights on those look like, right? If you have 30-day contracts for your big customers, well, I guess in this context, maybe it's more of like a case-by-case basis, so that's probably not relevant. Just really kind of all your corporate records. So corporate hygiene. Do your employees have employment agreements? Stuff like that. Just like all the.
Yeah.
Am I following kind of general basic corporate law? So that's the one side. The other thing you can do is you can really consider what a buyer is going to look at in advance. And so, can I talk about EBITDA? Is that okay?
We would.
Okay.
We cannot do an episode without talking about EBITDA.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about it because something that happens frequently is somebody comes to me and they say, I want to sell my business. I have $10 million in revenue. And I'm like, that's great. That doesn't mean a lot to me, though. What does your EBITDA look like? And that's what the buyer is going to ask.
And EBITDA means?
Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And a simpler way to think about it is what are your actual earnings from operations? Because that's what a buyer cares about, right?
Right.
Revenue, if you have a $10 million in revenue, that's amazing. But if you have, if your EBITDA is only $1 million, that looks a lot less attractive than somebody with $6 million in revenue, but maybe $5 million in EBITDA.
I think about that term, drive for show and putt for dough, right? The
I like it.
Yeah, revenue is the drive. Look how far I hit my drive. Yeah, but where's the hole?
Where
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What was how many swings did you actually take on that hole?
That's right.
Because that's really what I care about. And if you think about it, what a buyer is looking at when they look at your business is they want to know the future cash flow they're going to get from owning your business. So they don't want to look at, what does your debt facility look like? They want to wash all that stuff out because they're going to bring in their own facility. So just what's your actual operating income? And similarly, they're also going to take a look at your operating expenses. So they're going to do what are called EBITDA carve-outs, add-backs, or adjustments for non-ordinary course, both expenses and income. So say, for example, you had an amazing year because I don't think this would ever happen, but a lawyer said, Isaiah, we want you to handle this case for us, but it's a contingency case for us, so we're only going to pay you if we win. And if we do, you're going to get this huge settlement.
Right.
So you made $5 million in 1 year, and you go, this is awesome. I'm going to sell now because look at this. I made $5 million this 1 year.
Right.
A buyer's going to look at that and say, that's non-recurring. That's not ordinary course. That's not really how you calculate EBITDA. So they're really looking at what is the actual cash flow of the business I'm going to buy. There's a few other things they're going to consider that if you're going to sell your business, you should think about in advance. The next one is recurring revenue. That's something that's very attractive to a buyer. They want to make sure that when they come in, they know that revenue is going to continue. So say, for example, I'm at Rutan. So if we have a ton of trial lawyers. So if every trial lawyer used your firm, we were like, that is our go-to, you're probably going to get pretty consistent new cases from us, right? That's pretty strong recurring revenue.
By the way, I would love for that to happen, so please plant that flag. Yeah.
As a non-litigator, I don't know how much power I have in that, but we'll see what we can do.
But I understand the example, yeah.
Yes, and that also brings up another one or two examples of things you should consider, and that is strong customer concentration. If Rutan was your only client, that's a little risky, right? And maybe Rutan's your only client because I'm the big litigator at our firm, and I say, I love Isaiah. You all better use Isaiah. And then Isaiah sells his business and leaves. I'm like, I don't care who you use now. Use whoever you want.
Right.
That's really risky for the buyer. So if you have significant customer concentration, that's something they're looking at. So if 80% of your work comes from one business and you're like, I really want to sell in 2 to 3 years, my advice would be find other clients to build up that percentage because customer concentration is going to be one of the first things they look at.
And I will tell you from firsthand experience, we were presented with an opportunity to buy an agency a couple years ago, and we got a chance to look at their books, and we saw that they had 50% of the revenue was from one client, and it was a contract client. And so if that contract expired, now there was some built in where they said they were going to continue on in that relationship, that the sellers would stay and focus on that one particular relationship. But that was a huge risk to us, and it wasn't worth pursuing. So, yeah.
Exactly. How comfortable can you get with it? You know? And a lot of times you can't meet the clients in advance. So you don't get to walk in there and say, hey, if I buy this business from so-and-so, are we going to still work together? You don't get to ask those questions. Right. So you have to feel comfortable enough. So that's something that kind of can concern buyers. Kind of related to that too is how much of your business depends on you. Like if you as the seller walked away from your business for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and it fell apart, a buyer might not want that business because you might say, oh no, I plan on sticking around for 5 years. They can't force you to. And you don't know what's going to happen, right? There might be a business clash, or you might have a personal issue and you need to step away, or you might retire. So I would take a look at things like that in your business and make sure that all of those are kind of structured in a way that really attract a buyer. Another one is depending on where you're at in the cycle. Some buyers will go on like kind of a mini roadshow and they'll pitch buyers. And another, I have a client right now who's prepping for his pitch this week, and system and processes are another thing that buyers love. So they might be looking, especially when you get into the private equity shops, they have a ton of potential acquisitions on their table. What distinguishes you, and a lot of times very efficient systems and processes or new ways of doing things can differentiate you, and they really like that. Like if you're like, we've implemented this new AI system that helps us transcribe faster. I don't know though. What's the latest in your technology in your industry? Ben?
Well, I mean, if I could brag on my team
Please
a little bit.
do.
Yeah, so I have an amazing marketing and social media director who's revolutionized that whole side of the business, but she's also delved deeply into Claude Code. And so we've created an internal jobs board now that has saved, I don't know, hours, 5-10 hours a week of my scheduling and resource team from having to do these processes. They were automatically automated, and now it allows our resources to have more freedom to choose their jobs as well. And it was a huge time saver. And I mean, anybody can do it, but we have our internal systems now that are making this so much easier and better to do. So that's just one example, but
that's the perfect example though. Because if I'm a buyer, I'm looking at you, I'm thinking, oh wow, I really like what they have in place there. And guess what? We have maybe 4 or 5 other agencies under our umbrella. If we buy this company, I want them to install that process over here. And now all these other businesses we own are going to become more efficient. So they love stuff like that.
But I can see why.
Yeah. So those are a few things that buyers are looking at.
So let's just do a rough back of the napkin example. So speaking about EBITDA and an owner, and say the owner, we see this a lot. There's a lot probably of agencies, older agencies, that may be in the $1 million to $1.5 million annual revenue range, right? And they think, okay, well, I'm going to base my selling point off of that number. What they really should be focusing on is what's my income at the end of every year? What's the profit at the bottom, right? So, and that number should be, I mean, to be a healthy business and attractive in general, what would you say a good bottom line number would be for $1.5 million revenue or $1 million revenue?
It depends. So as your EBITDA grows, you have additional buyers who will look at you, so you get a higher multiple. So which is why people are scaling through acquisition.
Right.
Because if you, and again, I don't know your industry personally, but say your EBITDA comes down to, 500,000, you might get a 2x multiple. So 5 times 2, they pay you $1 million. But say you can grow that to $1 million, you all of a sudden might be at a 3x multiple. So you haven't grown a ton, yet all of a sudden now you're getting paid $3 million.
Got
right?
it.
And so then you can imagine when you start scaling through acquisition, you can jump quickly from 500 to 5 million. And all of a sudden now you're selling at a 5x multiple. You just all of a sudden created a company that can sell for 25 million.
Wow.
And that is why people like M&A. And that is what I get super excited about because it's really fun for my clients. But you have to know how to do it right. You have to make sure that, it's the right company you're buying. You're not buying a dog business. You're buying a company that's really strong, that has the markers that we talked about, recurring revenue, no significant customer concentration. You're not heavily reliant on the owner remaining. You buy those good, strong businesses like that, you lump them together, and you sell for a higher multiple.
Well, I think that's a great way to end our chat today. Thank you so much, Kelly. This has been really interesting for me. Hopefully our audience has been interested in that. Where can they reach out and talk to you directly? How can they get in touch if they have more questions?
Sure. Google's my name, Kelly Galligan at Rutan, and my email is kgalligan@rutan, rutan.com. But I'm pretty easy to find online.
Great. Well, thank you for coming today.
Thank
to our
you.
audience, stay tuned. We'll have more to come in the following weeks. And thank you for joining us today on Court Reporter Confidential.